the one thing I learned is the harder they were on you, the more they actually like it.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, skid steer operators of all ages, welcome to another episode of the Skid Steer Nation podcast. As always, I am your host, Ryan Deemer. In addition to being the host of this wonderful podcast, we also own skidsteernation.com. It is your home for high-quality American-made attachments. We have quite a catalog of attachments that range from buckets, telescoping booms, graders, stump grinders, augers. If you're looking for high-quality attachments to help you improve your business, your efficiencies, make a better return on investment, head over to skidsteernation.com and see the attachments we have available. Well, this week on the show, guys, we've got a gentleman from out in Monroe, Connecticut. He grew up in the excavation industry. He was telling me briefly about some stories with his grandpa when he was a child. I can't wait to hear more about those. I think we're all going to get a good laugh out of some of those. He went out on his own in 2020. His name of his company is County Construction. So without further ado, let's welcome Rich Ochsendorf.
Thank you.
Yeah. How are you doing today, Rich?
Not too bad, lovely day out here. How are you?
Yeah. So Monroe, Connecticut, close to Hartford?
Not really. About an hour out of Hartford. We're right next to Newtown.
Newtown?
Sandy Hook area.
Okay.
Bridgeport.
Bridgeport. I think that's probably the town people might be able to recognize.
Yeah, Bridgeport or Newtown, usually.
Yeah, you're in one of those states though. Like people are like, "Where's that at?" Like
everything. Everybody's like, "Where are you near Hartford?" I'm like, "Yeah, ish. I'm closer to New York City than I am Hartford."
You go to Montana and you're like, "Shit, hour away." Like you're in the city.
Exactly.
Yeah, man. So, yeah, you grew up in this industry. Your grandfather started the business in the 70s. Your father worked in it. You've been around it since probably, I'm assuming you were in diapers.
Yeah, if not earlier.
Yeah. Gotcha. And so you've done nothing else in your life other than either work in the family business or work for yourself in the excavation.
I did a couple stints, short stints. I could never really work for somebody else for more than 6 to 7 months, but it was always an excavation. I'd get to a job site and I always felt not right because I couldn't run the job site. So for me, it was just a huge culture shock going from running job sites at 18, 19 to then being told what to do by the boss's son, who's now 17.
Yeah. So looking back at those experiences where you work for other people, can you go look back now and say, wow, there's a part of me that's glad I did that because I learned something, even though I hated it in the moment?
Oh, 100%. Like one guy I worked for, I left. I went to work for him, left, came back for a reason, treated us real well, showed me what I could get done by being the boss. And the guys that I worked with, a couple of the older guys in their late 60s, they just taught me different ways than what I was used to from my grandfather and my father. So they just taught me different ways to skin the same cat. And it's definitely been helpful when I went on my own, having 3 or 4 different guys experience in my book.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you mentioned like we have you guys fill out a few questions so we get a little information on you so we can have some topics. But like you mentioned, go be the gopher for somebody else. Go learn the material costs, learn how far away the supply house is, the parts of town. Those are things that a lot of guys don't think about when they start a business. And I thought it was really good advice.
Honestly, that was my job title when I started working for my dad. Once I got my license at 16, he'd call me out of school. I need this, I need that. So I'd be running from supply house to supply house. I'd be leaving, my fourth period social studies class to go pick up wheelbarrows and hand tools. And sometimes I even went and got the under CDL trucks and picked up asphalt for the guys. So like I had to learn how long it takes me to get from Norwalk to Darien and Darien back to Stanford and Stanford to here, and how long it would take me to get from Bridgeport to Darien. So I learned all of that in 2 or 3 years worth of being the gopher,
Yeah.
Or even the go get the coffee. You start to learn the little back roads of the area you're in. So now, the main road is all backed up. There's a little deli down here. I know where I am. You start running around and Now you're shaving 15, 20 minutes off a run when you're driving or to get to a job. And that was honestly probably one of the best things that I was taught.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in that. Like I hear a lot of people out there. I've even had a few people ask if they could shadow another company and work for free because the knowledge was more valuable than whatever the hourly rate was going to be.
Yeah. I mean, I got lucky with my father owning the business so that I got all of this before I stepped into the workforce. So by the time I graduated high school and got to being on the job sites, I already knew where all the supply yards were. I already knew where the spot where the asphalt is, the stone, pipe. I already knew how to get every piece of material that we needed and who closed when and what time and how long it would take me to get from here to there. So I knew exactly when I could leave job sites, how long I had to stay. Instead of leaving at 1 o'clock on a job site, I could stay till 2:30, which is just an extra hour and a half of, getting shit done.
Yeah. And then I also realized you to tie this all together, like all that knowledge you learn before you go out on your own. And like one of the things you talked about was that you lost money on your first 3 jobs. So even though you knew where the stuff and you knew some of the material costs, like it's a whole different ball game when you got to go from beginning to end on your own and not have somebody else in the background. So walk me through that a little bit.
So my father knew I was going to lose money. I ran the numbers by him. But he goes, "You're so thick-headed that I had to let you lose the money." It wasn't a substantial amount. I think one of the jobs was like 3 or 4 grand. I mean, it put me in a little bit of a hole to begin with, which is never fun, but it was a learning experience. I learned, I figured the job was going to take 2 days. Nope, I ended up having to rent another machine. Took me an extra 2 days. So that taught me, all right, so you think something's going to take 2 days? Bid on 4.
Yeah.
And you know what? What I learned too is customers love rebates. So if you do a job in 2 days and you bid it on 4 and you hand them back $500, you're still up a day and a half on, say, a skid steer.
Yeah.
And
I think, yeah, absolutely. I mean, customers like anything that they get back, right? And it does 2 things, in my opinion. And maybe you can agree or disagree or add to this, but like 1, it makes them happy.
Yep.
And then 2, it really builds a lot of trust between you and them. And they are going to go out and talk about you and beat your drum whenever somebody brings up anything related to dirt work in their area.
And that's exactly what happened. I had multiple phone calls through past clients. The only problem was that they couldn't afford the work that they wanted done. Other than that, they were like, "Oh, my friend so-and-so, they hired you. They absolutely loved it. They said that, you got the job done earlier than expected and you took a little bit of money off the bill." And granted, that $500 wasn't going to make or break me, but it built enough of a relationship to help me.
Yeah. And we don't have to go down the rabbit hole of client acquisition costs, but like whenever you spend money on advertising or flyers or email, like all that stuff takes time and money. So whenever you acquire a new customer, it's not free.
No.
So that $500 is probably par for the course for what you would have spent in ads on Google.
Yeah, finding something new, driving around. I have now 181,000 miles on my truck. At the beginning of last year, I had 150. And that was just from running for estimates. This truck doesn't do anything but go to estimates and go to the job site and back. So I'm a little bit less than a year. It was 30,000 miles just running around on estimates.
Yeah, that's a lot. Do you pre-qualify your customers before you drive out for estimates?
I do not. And I think that's something I should start doing because I have been running into a lot of window shoppers where they have me come out and I give them a price and then they hire somebody else that's cheaper for whatever reason that they may be. And it's just, yeah, we need to stop the window shoppers.
Yeah. The pre-qualifying questions to me is probably one of the most important things any existing business can either review and modify and improve on or start doing. Because the reference I always make is that you and Elon Musk have the same amount of time in a day. Like no matter how much money you're worth, you all got 24 hours a day. The difference is he's maximizing his time to a different level and he's leveraging other people and he's cutting out unnecessary tasks on a daily basis.
Yeah. One of the things I have been doing a lot lately is I have been getting just through guys that I worked for that have, an engineering division of their company. I have been getting, they've been giving me very large jobs to price out. So, that's been, I would say 70% of my running around lately. But the only problem is when you're small, trying to break into those big jobs, you already got somebody that's already massive that's coming in at the same price that has a huge reputation behind them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That is tough. And it's like one of the industries that I really recognize that in is like demolition.
Yeah.
Like where I live at, there's some massive demolition companies, and even with union laborers, they're less expensive than like a small single operator like yourself, because they have the material processing area. They're reselling the materials so they can make money, like it, not just on the demolition, and they're able to get their costs done because getting the materials as important to them as getting the work.
Yeah, that they own their own transfer stations, they own the containers, they own the trailers. I actually just lost a large demo. I bid on it, and it was, I think my price was like 145,000, and a company like what you're saying came in at 100,000. But the problem is they took all the brick, concrete, and asphalt right to their shop, crushed it, resold it, and charged the customer to put it in.
Yeah,
I had to go rent the crusher, and renting a crusher up here is 16,000 a week. So that's 16,000 profit gone right there off of my bid.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely certain industries and are really hard to crack into. And I always say, if you're not going to become like focused on that with 100% of your attention, sometimes it's just better to, I know that the money looks so good from the outside, but sometimes it's just better to say that's a distraction from what I really need to be doing for my business.
Yeah. So I only offer demolition now to builders. This way I come in, demo the house, strip the lot, stump it, all the whole nine, prep it for build, and then do the site work. That's the service I offer versus going out to demo a 40,000 square foot, office or something like that, because I'm going to get beat out on those.
Yeah. And really what you're talking about doing for demo now, like demo is kind of like, hey, instead of having to find another contractor, I'll take care of that for you, because you're doing all the dirt work, the site prep.
Yep. So I knock
just,
a little bit off of one side or the other and make it up on the other side.
Yeah.
So
And then
hey, I can do the demo for 40 if you give me the site work. Oh, my other guy came in at 55. Well, you take 15 off. I do all the site work, and it's a one-stop shop. You don't have to call around. It's just me.
Yep. You minimize that friction for that guy, and you just make life a lot easier. One point of contact.
Yep.
I think it's a smart method for you, like saying know your place in the demolition role. Unless I go 100% demo, I'm never going to compete with those big guys.
Those big guys. Yeah. I mean, these guys have machines that can reach up 60, 70 feet. They have the specialized cabs. They have everything.
Yeah.
Can't compete with that.
No, and like you said, with the time you add in all your rental costs and all that, you're either going to work for free to match their price or lose money, and
it's not worth it on a job that size.
No,
job that size, you could go 100 grand in the hole real quick.
Yeah, that's just it. We're not talking about a few $1,000s anymore. Like you miss that one by 5%, you're missing.
Yeah, cash. I don't mind missing a small $4,000 project by 5 or 10% because it just makes my hourly rate go down versus being in the hole.
Yeah.
But
no, I think that's fantastic. And so are you doing a lot of site prep and dirt work? Is that kind of your core service that you've been doing a lot of lately, or is there something else that you kind of focus on?
So my core service is site work, site prep, septic systems, and drainage systems. So my father has a friend who does systems. He doesn't want to be doing the work anymore. He just wants to get paid to sell the job. So I do septic tanks and new systems, and that's been more of my bread and butter. I landed this, I would say, house, but it's more of a mansion. It's a 60 by 80, and it's got a 10-foot basement ceiling.
Wow.
Yeah, it's quite a large job.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Things like this is like, it keeps me busy, but the problem is I got one more week until I'm not here for 3 months.
Why is that?
Yeah, I got to wait for all the siding and roofing and for them to finish framing and do all that. Then I can come back, do my roof leaders and my septic. So these kind of jobs aren't that the best to stay busy, but the smaller, like a new septic or a new drainage system, those are where I try to get to.
Yeah.
If I can.
Are you doing more septic and drainage on like new site for construction or on existing homes?
I am doing more replacement. So fixing old systems, getting rid of them, new tanks, because the old tank's 35 years old, the fields are 40 years old,
Yeah. So I know every state's so different, but like what's the regulations in your state, Connecticut, for being able to install or inspect septic systems? Do you have to go through any classes or?
Yeah, so you have to be licensed. I think it's the P7. I'm not 100%. because I still haven't gone for my license. I pull everything underneath my father's permit because my father has the permit. So I pull everything out under, well, he pulls the permit. So, and then I do the work and he's just there while when I get the inspections and all of that.
Gotcha. Yeah. Cause like we've worked with guys in Oklahoma, man, and their DEQ department for septic systems, they put a lot of friction in for excavating companies to become septic system companies. Like, you better make it your focus, because not only you got to have all the testing and all that, but you've got to install 5 systems before they'll even give you a license underneath somebody else. That's like, I mean, it's
the same
crazy.
here.
Yeah.
It's the same here. The problem is I don't have all of mine documented from when I was doing them, because like I said, I started putting in systems and stuff when I was still in my teens.
Yeah.
I was 13, 14 helping on the job site. And then I was doing 6 houses a year with my father, full new construction. So I was doing 6 septic systems a year, and none of them are documented. So getting my write-offs has been the most difficult part for me.
Yeah. But it sounds like you've got enough of an in for that industry. It's worth your time to keep moving forward with it.
Oh, 100%. 100% worth my time to do it. And if I can't get the permit to myself, like I said, my father's got a friend, real close childhood friends. He'll pull the permit, and I just owe him a little bit of money on the top.
Yeah. And that kind of just makes me think, like, it's so important to have good relationships with a network, not only of potential customers or referral people like real estate agents, insurance companies, but with other excavation companies.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I definitely messed up. I think I should have kept a couple more relationships instead of burning the bridges, just because it probably would have helped me out a lot more when I get slow. But the guys that I do keep a relationship with, they, I get something from them once or twice a month, nothing major, but, it's a job I didn't have to go work for. It's something I didn't have to go looking for. I just got a phone call. Hey, can you do it for this price? I look at the plans. I'm like, yep. And, the job's mine.
Yeah. And that should be the goal of every excavation company owner out there, is like leveraging other people's time to send work your way.
Yeah, especially since I'm a young guy, I'm 29, no kids, no wife, no nothing. I have abundance of time. A lot of guys in this industry are in their mid 40s, early 50s with a wife, kids. They want to spend time with their kids. So if you can leverage, like, hey, I can do this job for you, and you make 10 or 15% on it, but you don't have to do anything. It's something I've learned how to sell to the older guys that want to spend time with their kids. Now they don't have to be on that job for 40 hours, and they get to spend time with their kids instead.
Yeah, I love that. I think more business owners should be doing that, is like leveraging the network of other companies out there and finding other guys that have been in your path and been doing it for 20 or 30 years, because there are certain jobs that they don't want to do because they don't like it. Yep. Or there's just jobs they don't want to do because they don't want the time commitment to it.
Yeah, I've learned it's more the time commitment, or they just think it's not big enough for them, but they're like, oh, I got it. And I'm just like, well, I'm slow. I'll take it. If you don't want it, take your percentage off the top, and here's my number for it, and add whatever you need for yourself.
Yeah.
And, they'll do it, or sometimes the customer can't afford it, but, it's just something I didn't have to work with. I didn't have to do anything to get that.
Right.
And it's something that's the key.
Yeah, like you don't have to drive out to do the estimate. You don't have to spend an hour doing that. You don't have to do follow-up phone calls. Like, no, there's a lot of value to that time.
It saves me 3 hours of my day right there.
Yep. And for 10%, depending on the size of the job, that 10% might be less than the value of your 3 hours.
Yeah. Say you get a $4,000 job, $400. My hourly rate that I like to charge is $150 an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So that 10% is worth the 3 hours of my time.
All day.
Yep.
All day. One of the things you talk about is, like, because you've been doing this so long, and I'm sure you're adding a little buffer on your estimates for time frame is part of the reason why, but like you said, you're really good at finishing ahead of schedule. Yeah. I'm just wondering, like, how you've gotten to that level, and like how you track job by job in your head or on paper, like your hours and versus your actual hours versus your estimate hours.
So I do it all in my head just because I know how long something should take. And for the longest time, it was literally just me, my father, and my grandfather doing full site work, full jobs, houses, mega mansions down here in Fairfield County. They're stupid. They're 6,000 square feet plus. They're massive. Like, me and you will never live in one of these houses. They're huge. And I don't know. I think it was just the way that I was brought up, because every time you move that excavator or every time you back that truck in, it's always got to be doing something. So if you got the shovel in your hand and you're digging, you got to be moving. And when you're running a machine, every movement is time. Every movement is time, and you could save 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. Next thing you know, by the end of the week, you've saved 3 or 4 hours, or you could save yourself days just by setting up the job site properly.
Yeah.
And
So can we talk about that a little bit? Like setting up the job site properly? Like give me an example and kind of walk me through how you would set up.
Okay. Perfect. So perfect example is this job site. It's on an acre. House, like I said, is probably somewhere in the 8,000 square foot range. The footprint is just under 4,000 square feet, and 2,100 yards of material came out of the hole. I rented a PC 290 to dig the foundation. And what I did is I dug the back wall and probably about a 10-foot wide section and threw all that material on the backside of the house for backfill. And then the rest of the material I threw to the front where I could back in triaxles, no problem, get them loaded and get them out, or spread the material in the front. So I had probably 400 yards in the back and 1,600 rest and piled in the front. I only end up having to move 60 or 70 yards out of the back as excess versus having to split, that pile of 2,000 yards and move out 1,000 yards from the back, bring it to the front, and then spread it in the front. Something like that with, even so, I say you have like a 160 size excavator, that saves you 2 days of moving material.
Yeah.
And then,
and you're talking about minutes of like just stopping and assessing before you start putting your hands on the sticks.
5 minutes, lay out the house roughly, because I don't dig the jogs in the house. I dig a square hole or a rectangular hole. I don't put any of the jogs in. And you think, oh, but you got so much extra material. Yeah, but that 20 minutes of messing around with the freaking corner and getting that right, you could have just dug out the extra 30 yards. And it's just stupid things like that. And then, okay, so like the topsoil too. I have 2 different topsoil piles on this job. One in the front that'll cover about the front of this house, and then a pile in the back that's going to be all, I would say 75% excess. But it's a straight shot when you back a truck in around the garage. It's right there to load into a truck. And it's just simple things like that add up.
Yeah. It kind of reminds me as a kid growing up, my dad would tell me, remember the 6 P's. Do you remember the 6 P's, Rich?
I have no idea what those are.
Proper planning prevents piss poor performance.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense. Heard that one before.
Yeah. So like my dad, my dad would always he'd pound in the 6 P's and we'd always pound in the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. Yeah. Like if you start overthinking things, you just got to tell yourself, keep it simple, stupid.
Man, it's just dirt. It's just dirt. There's nothing, I see it all the time. Like I'll drive by other jobs and I'll see it all the time. Guys got 3 or 4 different piles of fill. They got a pile of stumps in the front, a pile of stumps in the back. Take the extra 10 minutes and put them in a little truck or whatever, or walk them to the front of the house, or walk them to where the dumpsters are going to go, and just pile them all there. And it's stupid shit like that, man. That guys are losing hours over.
Yeah, and I think you probably I would categorize that into like the younger guy category because they're just so excited to get to work, and they just skip that 5-10 minute phase. I mean, the older guys, they've been around the block. They're in no rush to finish their coffee. They've already got the plan in their head of how it's going to roll. And there's a value in that. There's a value in that patience. Huge value in that. So we actually worked, this is going off of that, but a larger company they had 6 guys on their crew at the time. But we went through and implemented like a morning walkthrough process.
Yep.
And every day the owner was like twitching because they were losing 15, 20, 30 minutes of work time laying it all out. But I was like, just trust the process, man. And by the end of the week, he's like, we're a day and a half ahead of schedule, even though we're missing 30 minutes every morning. I go, yeah, everybody's on the same page. There's no question of what the next step is. The material is exactly where it needs to be. Like it just plans out the whole project.
Yeah. And like for what I did with this pile of fill, I have a drainage system in the front of it, then the driveway, and then 2 drainage systems to the other side of the driveway. But you get back straight down the driveway, and even these freaking truck drivers, man, they can one shot back right to the pile, right underneath the bucket, load the truck, and go. And
Yeah.
it's just something as simple as that. He doesn't have to background anything. It's just back in and go. And
And I don't know if you've noticed this or not, Rich, but I'm curious to know, like, do you find like the hidden benefit of that is like these truck drivers go out of their way with you because you make their life easier from job to job?
that, yeah, I would say that there's a couple of guys that I've worked for, I got in slow over winters going to work for them. So I call them and I'm, up on their list of guys they'll go work for right away because of two things. They know it's going to be simple, and two, they get a check in a couple of days.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely way easier on everybody. Then I don't have to worry about the truck driver running over any of my sticks, any of my layout stuff, any of my septic system or drainage systems that they can't run over. I know everything underneath them's hard. Nobody's going to get stuck. I'm not going to get a phone call if a guy's loading himself. Oh, I got the truck stuck, because you're right on the driveway. It's all the old crushed blacktop, and 75 other trucks have driven over. It's all hard.
Yeah. And I would almost guess that maybe not the owner of the company, but the drivers themselves, they care more about how easy you make their job than they do that they're sending a check in 2 days right after they do.
100%. The truck drivers around here, I don't know how they are anywhere else, are not exactly the smartest nor the most active people.
So we always make the joke that when the window goes up, the ears get closed. Like they stop listening. They can't watch hand signals. It's like
they don't hear the horn,
nothing. Yeah.
I got a 28-foot driveway opening. I have a 16-foot driveway for in the back end. I make everything just as simple as it can be, because not having to yell at them or not having to watch them run over anything they're not supposed to makes my life easier. It makes their life easier. They're in, they're out, they're gone, they come back. And It's just the easiest thing for everybody.
Absolutely. So like, going off of this, making it easy for people and like minimizing friction. So is most of the work you're doing, are you doing that as a subcontractor through a GC, or are you getting hired by resident homeowners?
It's split
50-50. So when you're working with like a homeowner, like how do you make the process so simple that they want to hand you a check?
I make sure to let them know that, look, while I'm working, this job is going, if you don't know what's going on, you're going to be nervous. I try to calm the nerves the best I can. Be like, look, I understand. Like I've been there. Like if you don't know what's going on, it's going to look like a bomb went off, and it's going to make you nervous. I said, but you just got to give me, like, say I have an estimate for a week. I'm like, give me till day number 4, and you'll start seeing everything coming together, and then you'll understand. And I haven't had any issues.
No, I think that's key, like that clear communication, because it is for a lot of these customers, it's the first time they've had something massive done to their property that they've actually been there day in, day out.
Yeah.
Like if you're building a new house, you might stop by and take a look at it and come back the next day, but like you don't have to live there. So it's not a huge deal. But when you live on that property and you have to look at that, and like dinner's getting cooked and you're staring out the window going, oh my God, this guy, I hired the wrong guy, right? Like, there's a mess. But if you walk them through that and explain to them up front, like, hey, for 4 days, you're going to be like, what in the world? And here's why, and here's what we had to do. And this is why we have to do it. On day 5, this all starts going away. And by day 6, you've got a perfectly leveled, backed out yard and all that. It just kind of builds that
trust.
It builds the trust, but yeah, like you said, it calms those nerves. And I don't think contractors are as good at that, because you guys do the work day in and day out. Like they cut that corner of talking to that homeowner at a 4th grade level, so he's fully aware of all the steps. That's
literally what it is. Like, you have to assume that 95% of your customer base has no idea what the hell you're talking about. It's like when you're a mechanic or something else, like you have to explain it so that a 10-year-old could grasp the concept of it. And I've noticed that works well. I mean, some people are just nervous Nellies, regardless what you tell them. I have one customer like that. He was always constantly nervous until the job was done. Then he was happy. But during the process, he couldn't visualize what I was trying to explain to him. And I would get a phone call like every other day.
Yeah.
But it wasn't an issue because, he paid up front. The money always came in. And he wasn't yelling at me. He was just nervous. So, you pick up the phone call, you dedicate that 15-minute phone call to him, and just customer service. It's always number one.
Man, we could pound the hammer on that one all day long. Like we preach that, like, the customer experience is at the top of everything, because if the customer doesn't have a good experience, you don't have a business.
No. And I'm too small to tell a bad customer to go fuck themselves.
Yeah.
And as much as I would like to, some of these guys, man, I would really just like to tell them what I think, but I'm not at that point, and you really should never do that. But some guys are big enough to where their phone is constantly ringing and they're giving away jobs that same size, then they can do it. But when you're starting out and you're small and you're only in business a year or two or three, you kind of have to suck up your pride a little bit and sit there and just explain everything like they're a toddler.
And that's true. I mean, if you and I went and sat in with a NASA physicist, he'd have to explain that shit like we were toddlers, because not a word he'd said would make sense if he talked his jargon.
Oh no. I tell people, like, they'll find the Home Depot, that white pipe that crushes real easy. They're like, oh, why can't you use this? It's like $8. I'm like, no, I use SDR for a reason. They're like, well, what's SDR? And I show them a picture, I find it on Google. I go, it's this. I said, but here's the difference. And I'll show them a couple pictures I have where, like, I have the machine right on top of the pipe and it's not even ovaling. And I'll show them with the white pipe that, like, I can squeeze it by hand.
Yep.
And it's not like I'm Eddie Hall over here where I'm, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm a normal sized guy and I'm squeezing this pipe by my hand. I'm like, you put this under 3 or 4 feet of material, it's eventually going to crush.
Right. Yeah. And then the exact side of that, that's a great example, because, like, we work with guys who's like, well, I tell my customers we use Schedule 40 pipe. And I'm like, I bet you 9.9 out of 10 have no clue what Schedule 40 pipe is. No, they don't have a clue what it is. Like, you're speaking jargon. You're not speaking.
Yeah. I almost always have like a short 2 or 3 foot piece of 4-inch SDR on my truck for whatever reason. It just ends up there. And I'll use that little piece. I'll go, look, try to squeeze it. And they're like, oh, I can't move it. I'm like, stand on it. Like, it's not going to move. And I'm like, that's why I use this pipe versus other pipe. And I'm like, and it's not too hard where it's brittle. I'm like, it's going to flex and give a little bit, but it's not going to collapse on you. Yeah. Unless, you drive a loaded dump truck over it. But these are, for footing drains and roof leaders and things that aren't going to be getting driven over.
Yeah. And did you ever look at them and just say, hey, this extra $400 expense today, so we don't use this pipe, is going to save you $8,000 in a year and a half or 2 years when we have to come back and redig it and replace this pipe because it's collapsed on itself and it doesn't allow any water drainage?
That's part of my argument with them. I'm like, look, I said, I tell them I will guarantee my entire job, material, labor, everything for the next 2 years, depending on what it is. But for some of these drainage systems, I guarantee them for a year or two. I'm like, if we use my SDR pipe, I said, if you make me put in that white pipe from Home Depot, I will not guarantee a single thing.
Yep.
And they're like, why? I go, I don't trust the pipe. It's not worth my time. I don't even want to put it in. And I refuse to. And I tell them simply, like, I will not.
How does that work for you when you remove the guarantee from them? Do they get on your page, or is it still an argument?
It's somewhat of an argument because a lot of people, like I said before, are window shopping. They're just, they're window shopping. They want the cheapest price. And I'm like, look, I'm not going to give you the cheapest price because I know it's not going to work. I'm not going to put my name on something. So I'd rather not get the job than put my name on something I know is going to fail in the next couple of years.
Yeah.
And sometimes they get on my page. Sometimes they don't.
I would really recommend you kind of like just think back for the last 20 or 40 phone calls you've had with customers and go, oh, I should have asked them this question before I drove out there, and start making that list of all those questions, and then just refine it until you get the list of 5, 10, 15, whatever the number is that gives you enough information for you to even justify going out for that estimate and protect your time.
That is definitely something I think I have to work on. This year's been a little slow though, and I've been hearing that for a lot of guys. Like a lot of the bigger guys that I know are no new jobs, just jobs from last year. Yeah. Or if they do get a new job, it's 30 or 40% less work than they had the years prior. And they're just finishing up old jobs and starting new jobs. So this year's just a weird year or two to begin with.
Yeah.
But
so I think with the thing that you've got going for you though, is like a lot of the services you offer are needs, not wants. And I think the guys that offer services that are more want based, like land clearing or things like that, like, you can hold off getting your back 40 cleared out for a year or two until you're comfortable with the economy or whatever else. but you cannot hold off putting drainage in because water's slamming against your foundation every time it rains.
Yeah, I just did one job like that last year, middle of last year, actually right around this time last year. Yeah, where the back of her house is facing the hill, so all the water was running down into the old patio, seeping underneath the patio, and then through the foundation because the foundation was old. It was one of the old fieldstone foundations. But she had to get it repointed. She had a waterproofer come in, and then I think it was 30 tons of stone and a 6-inch pipe, and ran it out and around the daylight, and she hasn't had an issue since.
Yeah.
And like she had puddles of water coming into the house.
But we could be in a recession heading to a depression. And if that's your home, you're still going to find a way to get that done because it's less expensive to add that drainage than it is to
redo the house.
Replace the whole house. I mean, so I think that's where I think a lot of guys like sometimes like having those want-based services is great when times are good. But what are the need-based services that can get you through the lean times?
Yeah. And I found drainage and septic is really one of the most reliable ways of, keeping yourself busy, you and one or two other guys busy. Like if you're at that point, I'm at a one-man show right now. I mean, it is what it is, but it's my first full year. I was in the union, so.
Yeah, but you're right. Like those services, no matter what the economy's like, there's still a need. There's still a need for them.
Yeah, if your septic's back up into your house, you need to fix that.
Right.
If your fields aren't draining, that needs to get fixed. If your tank's collapsing in on itself, it needs to get fixed.
Nope, absolutely. I think that's something that's really important for some of the guys to be like, when you look at what you offer, like those guys with those dedicated land clearing machines and all that. I'm like, I hope your customer base are recession-proof customers that, depend on that land clearing. And it's not just for recreational use, because if it is, you're going to have some lean years sometime down the road. Yeah. So I want to talk about your grandpa.
All right.
So the old timer starts the business in the 70s.
Yeah. He came over here from Germany right after World War II. He grew up literally dirt floor poor. Him and my grandmother both. They met at a German American club. He came over not speaking a lick of English. He had a sponsor for one of his cousins, came over, that whole nine. He actually started getting into excavation by digging graves.
And back then that was done by hand, right?
No, so he had an old backhoe.
Okay.
He said that it was 2-wheel drive. No, it just had ROPS, just roll over. That was it. He said there was no teeth on the bucket. 2 of the shanks were pretty much completely gone. Had one good tooth. And that's how he got his start in digging. And then I guess he was digging a grave one day, and one of the bigger guys down here saw him and was like, oh, I like that guy, and offered him a job. He made a good friendship with him, got into the business, got more experience, then went on his own. And when he passed, the guy had quite a few million. So
the power of compound interest and saving.
That and right investments, using the company as the proper leverage. At one point the business had 30 some odd employees.
Wow.
So it wasn't always a small, mom and pop shop. At one point, this was a relatively large excavation company.
Yeah.
Yeah. They had 10 excavators and 3 or 4 laborers per excavator plus operators.
Yeah. That's a commitment to the community right there. Like you got to keep the workflow coming in because you got a lot of families dependent on you for food on the table.
Oh yeah. They did that for 15 years, give or take, until the 80s recession hit.
Mm-hmm.
Then they scaled down to, I think, 10 guys, and then 07 hit. And then it was just me and my father and my grandfather from basically then on.
Gotcha. Yeah. That 07, man. I remember that because I owned my business back through that. And, you hear stories of like the gas hike prices in the 70s and what it did, or you hear stories about the ridiculous interest rates in the 80s and how bad it was. And now that it's 07's past, it's been over 10 years. Like you look at that, like it's on the same level as all of that.
Yeah, I would say if not worse.
And it's funny. And it's funny though, Rich, because I look back at that and go, it sucked, but it wasn't like doom and gloom. We're never going to recover.
Yeah.
So it made me question like all the reports you hear about the things from the past and how bad it was. And I'm like, Was it that bad, or is it just the way you want to remember it? Like, yeah, it did suck. Don't get me wrong. Like, I ended up closing a business because of it, but I didn't jump off a balcony because I couldn't handle it. And
Yeah. I mean, we got lucky because I say we, but I mean my father and my grandfather got lucky because one, my grandmother was very stingy with money, which helped immensely. And then the 2 years leading up to that, '07, they landed a new builder who was more of the 1% and the 1% builder. So the jobs where you would go and figure, say the job was $50,000. Well, for them it was 100,
got it.
and they were writing the checks every other week.
Yep.
Not a single question. I mean, everything had to be meticulous. Your work had to be up to par, but you were giving a certain clientele a certain level of work that my father and grandfather and the Portuguese laborers were able to uphold.
That's fantastic.
And yeah, so they were able to put enough money in the bank where, '07 sucked, but they had enough money to pay the mortgages, enough to pay the bills. They kept the lights on in the shop, a couple small jobs here and there, just enough to float it. And that's what they did.
Yeah. It's important. I know. I mean, and not for the guy that started out this year by no means, but in hell, even him, it's important to me to like take a small percentage from everything you do and like just stick it separate account. You can always pull it. You can always pull it out if you got a bill you got to pay. But
yeah, my viewpoint on that is, I live in one of the most expensive states in Connecticut. Connecticut, it's down here is ridiculous. Like my house is 1,100 square feet on 0.8 acres, and my taxes are $6,500 a year.
Yeah,
like it's like the house is nothing. Like it's ridiculous. I only need to pay myself $1,000 a week through the business. That's all I take. $1,000 a week. I pay I think it ends up being like 1,400 the company pays to give me $1,000. Your company can pay for everything else. Your fuel for your truck is a write-off. Your repairs on your truck, you can go through the business. You don't need to pay yourself $100,000 a year to get $100,000 worth of benefits.
Right. Yeah, and then
that's what a lot of guys I don't think understand. You pay yourself 60 grand a year. Well, you haven't paid for fuel. You haven't paid for clothes. You haven't paid for electricity at your house because you're home office. You haven't paid for internet because home office. And next thing you know, you're really only paying your mortgage.
Yeah, and for those guys out there like yourself, are you an LLC or an S corp?
That's a good question because, like I said, the company is the same from the '70s. So I think we're an S corp.
Okay, so and some guys don't understand this out there, but like an LLC is basically an extension of yourself. So whatever profits are in that business, whatever expenses are in that business, they cancel each other out, and whatever's left, you get like a K1 schedule that goes, and then you file your personal taxes with that K1 schedule from the LLC.
Yeah.
So like if you made $150,000 in profit, that $150,000 is considered income to you.
Yeah.
Right. With an S corp, you can pay yourself what they call a reasonable wage. So you can pay yourself that $1,000 a week, the $1,400 a week, $63,000 a year. And then every quarter or once a year, you can write yourself a dividend from the company. And that dividend only pays income taxes, not all the other back end taxes. So you can actually minimize your taxes on your money by moving to an S corp when you reach a certain level with your business.
Yeah, that's pretty much all the financial advice that I was given. That's what everybody told me. They're like, register all your vehicles, personal vehicles, everything that you need registered on the company. Have the company pay for 90% of everything you need because the company gets paid, gets a write-off for it. And then, it ends up costing you less money for the same stuff. I'm not saying go out and buy yourself that brand new, fully loaded pickup for 100 grand that they're going out, but
Yeah. So, I mean, like for me, like the salary I took from my business last year and the owner compensation / benefits that I received, like the cell phone or all those things that, you'd have to pay out of your pocket if you didn't own the business.
Yep.
They were almost equal last year.
Yeah. And that's something that a lot of guys, the younger guys, don't really fully grasp. Like this pickup, I had to do, some front end work, the brakes, transmission. I was probably 5 or 6 grand in repairs in the last year. Put it all through the business instead of taking it out of my pocket, because instead of paying myself, getting taxed on that, and then paying for it, I got the same thing minus paying all those taxes on. on everything.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. I mean, and if anyone out there listening to this is like kind of confused or lost and all that, I would recommend go talking to two different people. One, go find a good accountant. He's going to be straight lined. Like you have to do this, to do this, to do this. And then go get a mentor that owns a business so that he can show you what the accountant really meant when he said this, because he can't give you that advice
yeah. You want that gray area.
Yeah.
Like when it comes, like the same thing with a lawyer, like I know what the laws are. I want you to tell me what you can do about it in that little in between area. Like there's some accountants out there that are good for that. Mine is pretty good, I would say, about helping me skirt where I can, and tells me what I have to do and gives me things that he goes, I don't necessarily recommend it, but what you can do is X, Y, Z. I'm like, okay, so what you're telling me is this is the gray area where you can't legally, tell me to do it, but if I did do it, you could find a way to make it all work.
Yeah. Are you setting money aside yet for your retirement, or are you still investing all of it back into the business?
Depends on the year. Like when I was part-time, I was setting some aside into a retirement. I'm actually looking trying to grow the business a little bit more so I can start buying property.
Yep.
As my retirement. Buying.
Yep. And I will say as a business owner that I find investing in myself and my business is a much larger priority than it is into a retirement account.
Agreed. 100%.
Like, the value of Skid Steer Nation today, and we started it in 2020, I couldn't have invested that much money in 3 years.
It's just from, so say I land this job that I just put a bid on. It's an apartment complex, like it's a fairly large job. I will be buying new equipment for that job because that job will afford me it.
Yeah.
That new equipment, even if it devalues 50% in the next 4 years, there's no way in hell I would be able to invest $100-something thousand.
Right.
No way in hell. That's $25,000 a year. There's no way I could swing $25,000 a year in investment. And just with that one, say, $290, that machine's going to be worth well over $100,000 in 4 years.
Yeah. And I think, to go off of this, I think one of the things that you guys in the business and the industry, we don't look at selling the business at a certain point in life. Like there's a value to that, right? But you have to have that business structured properly, like people are buying a system that generates money.
Yep.
They're not buying a name.
Yeah.
So I always say, like, get your ducks in a row in the back end, like on the operations side, and like have SOPs, standard operating procedures from answering the phone to submitting estimates to anything and everything, so that when you do want to exit the business and somebody wants to buy it, they look at it and say, oh, this is turnkey, just like a franchise.
Yep. I am trying to find myself a nice lady to give me a couple sons so I don't have to sell the business. So I can, just, let it stay in the family. My father owns a piece of property down around by me that's, worth a pretty penny now because it's commercially zoned for heavy equipment in a city that's trying to get rid of that.
Yeah.
So that value is only going up. So when him and my mother pass, it's going to be going to me and my sister. Now, me and my sister will be getting a large inheritance of property through that. And I would like to be able to replicate that for my own retirement because they have it rented out and my father could retire tomorrow and make just as much money monthly from that rent as he does working in the union.
Yeah.
And that's just one piece of property.
I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on this, but I mean, over the last year and a half, I've lost both my parents. And so I've had to learn a lot about estates and management and all that. So the only thing I would ask you, Rich, is like, go talk to your parents. Do they have a trust? Is like are the assets in a trust?
So that's what I brought up to them.
Executors of the trust.
So they have it they have it in a will. And I have tried to talk to them about putting it into a trust. This way, when that time does come, me and my sister don't get fucked by the government.
Well, that's one thing. But here's the other thing. Like, there's probably a high chance that one or both of your parents was going to need long-term care as they get older.
Oh yeah.
So if those assets are in a trust for 5 years or longer, they're not assets of your parents, and the state and the nursing home, and nobody can go after them for payment for their long-term care.
Yeah.
5 years or less, they can go after it. So like for me, like when we had to put my mom in long-term care and all that, like their trust in the house was good, but the trust in the investments and all that was not. So like we had to get creative in like how to protect her assets so that we could maximize them. And like I wasn't trying to like hide them so that we could get it for myself. I was like, if she needs care for 5 years and we got to pay this much out of pocket, like we've got to make sure
we got the money for it.
We got the money for it, you know, where the trust to me was just a great, is the one thing that I wish I would have knew when I was younger. So I could guide and go work my parents and be like, hey, let's go meet with somebody and learn the value of a trust.
Yeah.
Just for that reason.
Yeah. I was watching a couple things on YouTube the other day about that for some reason. It just came up in my suggested things. And I was like, oh, you know, that's not a half bad idea. Instead of, you know, giving it down, I saw it on the financial back end. You know, it wasn't, there's less taxes, less everything you got to pay on it. And it just, instead of saying, here's a piece of property worth 1.5 million. Oh, and here's the taxes that come along with it. It factors in differently. You know, like you said, let's not go too far in the weeds there because I'm not 100% on that.
Right. And the one word that we can talk about that most people are going to recognize, it removes probate court.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of that it did.
You know, because there's no question of where the assets go or where they belong to or who's in charge of them. It just removes all. So, all right, enough of the deep, boring financial stuff, man.
Yeah, nobody likes that stuff.
All right, so real quick, back to your grandpa. You were a kid running around job sites. You would pester him and get in his way. How would he handle that?
So one of his famous things to do, now this guy was one of the actual good operators. He would stick the tooth of the bucket in my back pocket sometimes and rip my pocket off or push me out of the way with the bucket of the machine. Now, it didn't matter if it was a mini excavator or a 30-ton excavator. It didn't matter. You could get that tooth in your back pocket and either the pocket was going off or you're getting pushed out of the way. He would water in the bucket sometimes if I was being a real little shithead. You know, that would end up on me even if I was, way out of reach. He would figure out a way to, swing it and spray the water on me. Yeah, no, that guy had a lot of creative ways to get me to.
That's hilarious. I think the best thing about it is I'm sure everybody back then, including your parents, thought it was funny. And like, you're like, what just happened to me? And then, today's society, somebody takes a picture of that in a cell phone and you're going to DCFS and getting removed from the house for child abuse. And yet that's the stuff that builds our character.
Yeah, I'm sure anybody who listens that can back me up on that. Grandpa or the old timers, they were not nice to us. Yeah. There was no such thing as taking care of our feelings. And the one thing I learned is the harder they were on you, the more they actually like you.
Yeah.
So the more shit you got during the day from that old timer sitting in the machine, the more he yelled at you, the better you were.
Yep. And if you want to, you could actually relate that to when we were young, we weren't nice to the girls we liked.
No.
It's the same philosophy.
I'm still not nice to the girls I like.
We picked on the ones that we liked the most,
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you're right. My dad didn't bail me out of everything. He's figure it the fuck out.
Yeah. My father will bail me out when he knows I know what I'm doing, but I'm just overwhelmed. If I'm on a job and he knows I know what I'm doing, he'll come and bail me out. Right. By giving me an extra hand, because man, sometimes I do get myself into some situations I should not be getting myself into.
I'm talking more as a younger child. He made me learn problem solving skills.
Oh yeah, my father sit me down. And he goes, "Figure it out."
Yeah.
First day I got my CDL, right? I didn't even have my full CDL. I had just my learner permit at 18. He made me take our 6-wheeler with the 25-ton tag and a paver. And with the paver, it was just a hair wider than the trailer, so you couldn't see the end of the trailer when you're backing up. He goes, bring it to this job. By the way, you're going to have to turn here and then back down the road. I'm like, oh, okay, no problem. Figuring there's a couple houses. It was 1.5 miles on a barely 2-lane with cars parked on each side. And it was figure it the fuck out and don't hit anything.
Yeah.
I'll see you when you're there.
That's hilarious. And again, man, those are the things that you don't forget. If he
No,
would have
now
drove that
because
truck for you and told you you're not ready for that, you never would remember that day.
nope, that and he we had a nice Kenworth T800 triaxle with an 8-speed, gorgeous truck, like brand new. He goes, take the truck and don't bring it back till you know how to shift it. He didn't come with me. He goes, you've driven with me enough. I did. I drove with him enough moving equipment. He goes, you know how to do it. You know what it's supposed to sound like. Go take the truck around the block and don't bring it back until you know how to shift it.
That's
Spent like 5 hours in the truck.
That's fantastic.
Yep. And he goes, make sure you take a left out of the shop and take the left around the block instead of taking a right, because the left was all uphill with a bunch of stops uphill. So he goes, take a left. He goes, if you take a right, I'm going to call you and you bring that truck back and we're going to do this again tomorrow. And yeah. So needless to say, now I know how to start on a steep ass hill with a full load and truck doesn't roll back. I can put a trailer pretty much anywhere, but I never would have gotten there if I hadn't been told, go do this and figure it the fuck out.
Yep. I mean, I remember my dad, I told him I wanted, like, he was big and we were big into fishing growing up, and he used those bait casters with the open reel.
Yep.
And I said, I want to learn how to use that. I think I was like 12 years old. So he went in the garage and got me a bait caster from the 1950s that used to belong to my grandpa. And he put it on a rod and he gave it to me with a sinker on it. And we're in the backyard. And he's like, if you can learn to cast this, you can cast any bait caster out there. And it took me like 3 weeks until I stopped getting those rat's nests in the line. And I hated it. I'm like, Dad, I want one of the new ones. They're easier to use. Like, I know they're easier to use, but you figure out how to do self-tension with your thumb and all of that. And then these are going to be a walk in the park for
me. Yeah. Like I said, I might have learned how to shift on that Kenworth, but I got stuck in the 85 Mac more often than I would like to admit. And that 85 Mac had 200, the Mac 237, I think it was, with the 5-speed with the aux. So it wasn't a 2-stick, but you had to start out in low and the aux in first, and then get that aux to your primary drive. I forget what the name of it was, and then you could start shifting instead of just the Kenworth where you put it in a low hole and then it's all one nice smooth thing. No, go take that. Learn how to downshift and upshift when you got a load on, when you're going up and down hills. You don't have the power to bail you out. Because that Kenworth, I could just stick it in fourth gear and just pull any hill I wanted to.
Yeah.
Didn't matter. It took no brains to drive that truck. But that Mac, it took brains for pretty much everything except for dumping. That truck would dump on stupid angles. That was the only major benefit over the Kenworth.
Gotcha. Oh man, Rich, I want to be conservative of your time. We've been talking for a little over an hour now, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with you. I mean, I love when people are vulnerable enough to talk about their failures and the things they learn the most from, and they don't just want to show that it's all rainbows and unicorns. And I really want to thank you for doing that and like sharing that with these guys. Like, we're all on the same path. We're all trying to grow our business. We're all trying to be better than we were yesterday. And the only way to do that is to like get some reinforcement from time to time from other guys going, hey, shit happens. You have two choices: fold in the cards and call it a day, or learn from it and be better tomorrow. Yeah.
I mean, what can you learn when things are going right? You don't learn anything.
Nothing.
You learn from all your mess ups. None of my successes have taught me nearly as much as any of my failures. And I will speak more about my failures because who really gives a shit about your successes anyway?
Right.
Half the people you talk to, they don't care that you're doing good. They just want to hear the bad shit. So you just talk about the bad shit because you know what? This is all the shit I learned from. This is who made me who I am. How this got me to where I am.
Yeah, but I will warn you. Be careful of that, because do you know why most people want to hear the bad shit?
They don't give a shit about you.
Because they want to make sure that you're dragged down to their level, because they don't have the nuts to go out and do what you're doing and start a business and try to better yourself.
Oh yeah, and for me, I've always never cared what other people thought. So for me, it's easy to share. You know what? I made a fuck up here. I messed up, and that's always been easy for me because I know on the other side of that coin, it's nice and shiny.
Yeah.
Like I know things that I'm doing good.
Yeah. So in my company, we actually celebrate the failures.
It's not a bad idea.
No, when my team members fail, we actually celebrate it, and then we turn it into like a training/learning moment. And then we look at why they failed. Like, was it something that I didn't provide them in the beginning? Was the steps of how to do the job not properly defined? Did they just try it a different way? Like, and then we can go through and we either A, refine our process, or B, we make them a better person. And very rarely C, you just say you're not a good fit. I should have never hired you.
Yeah. Because you know what? 9 out of 10 times with a mistake, there's usually something simple behind it.
Yeah.
Something very simple that, either somebody really just plainly didn't know or didn't have the tools to recognize. And that's really it.
100%. And if you take extreme ownership as the owner of your company, and if they didn't have the tools or they didn't know exactly what to happen, if you take extreme ownership and say, wow, I failed you, I should have given you better clarity, or I should have given you a better tool, your culture and your team will rally around you during the worst of times and run with you through the best of times.
Yep. That between that and, maybe 1 or 2 coffees a week, you'll keep guys forever.
Yeah. Yeah. We talk about this quite a bit, but like there's a lot of studies out there that say when you give somebody a financial raise, you see an increase in performance for 7 to 14 days. And then it becomes the new norm. So they go right back to the way they worked before.
Yep. So that's the financial, as long as you pay your guys a reasonable wage, and then, like you said, extreme ownership, and then, every now and then buy them lunch or buy a coffee or something. It goes way farther than you would think.
Yeah. And just make them feel like they have a voice within the company, and that make sure that like they feel like your mission can become theirs.
Yeah. It's huge.
Yeah, that's huge, man. And I'll be honest with you, Rich, I think that's an amazing stopping point. Like that was a hit home topic, and I don't want to water it down with some
bullshit rambling.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So
I hear you. I got to finish making this driveway so people can come and go before I get yelled at by the town anyway.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks again for taking time out of your day. And I know you're sitting in the truck at a job site, so I really appreciate you fitting us into your schedule, sharing your journey, your story, your family with all of us and our listeners. And I wish nothing but the best of luck to you. And I hope that you hit all the goals that you have for yourself over the next 1, 5, 10, and 50 years.
I appreciate it. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you.
Yep. Take care.